The opinions expressed on this program are solely those of its hosts, guests, or callers, and do not necessarily represent the opinions of WTBR-FM, its management, other producers, or sponsors.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to Backstory Let's Hear It on WTBR-FM Pittsville with Roberta McCulloch-Dews. Thanks for tuning in. So today we have with us, not necessarily a first for Backstory because we've done a part 2 in the past, but we have another part 2 for you. And previously, a couple weeks ago, we had a guest, and his name is Mike Fazio, and he's a certified financial planner with Greylock Investment Group. And he actually came on to Backstory and he told his experience of actually just going through addiction and what that was like for him. And we got into such a great conversation that we brought Mike back so that we could actually get into his life on the other side, because we talked a little bit about that journey beforehand. But Mike, for those who may not know you, and maybe they didn't tune into part 1, could you briefly just give a quick recap of who you are?
Sure. Well, Roberta, it's a pleasure to be here again, and I think we had a lot of fun the first time around. So hopefully we can have as much fun this time and tell a good story. So when we met the first time, I gave you a little background on, kind of where I'm from. What we talk about in the rooms of recovery, and we're here to talk a little bit about recovery, we talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So we're going to talk today a little bit about what it's like now. But what we talked about in round 1 was kind of like what it was like, where did I come from? So I come from Troy, New York. I've worked here in the Berkshires for 27 years. But I'm not from this area. I'm from New York. As we laughed a little bit about last time we were together, I tend to have a bit of a New York accent.
It's very New York.
It's a little weird today because I actually have a little cold, so I'm a little nasally. But I come from Troy, went to school in Albany, worked at Merrill Lynch way back when. I'm 57 years old. I come from a very ethnic background. It was the neighborhood I grew up in was primarily Italian. It was very poor, working class people. I was raised by a single mother. I have 2 brothers, an older brother who's autistic, who I'm very, very close with, a younger brother who struggles in his own way, who have been very close with at times. Right now, we battle a little bit. I was married for a long time. Divorced back in 2013. I have 2 children, soon to be 27 and 24. I'm remarried to a wonderful woman. We were married back in 2020. We both work here in the Berkshires. Incredibly happy. Have a wonderful relationship with my first wife, which is a story that could be part 3.
Yeah.
If you really wanted to dig there. And anybody who's ever gone through a divorce, I'm sorry, and you all know how difficult that can be. But I have a long history of substance abuse that started many, many years ago, and by the grace of God ended on January 30th, 2008. So I've been clean and sober now for about 16 and a half years. I spend every day working on that recovery in one way, shape, or form or another. And I think today we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like.
We are. And so, Mike, you really just, you gave a great synopsis of your background. And I think why that's important, and it's kind of a little bit about what we talked about in the first episode, is that when people see you, everything that you just shared, I don't think people would, they would prejudge you. Is that correct?
I think that's fair, right? So, I'm 57-year-old white male, 6 foot tall, 225 pounds, shaved head. I'm pretty active in the gym, so I like to think I can be a I don't know, maybe a little bit of a unique. I certainly don't. I don't think I look like what people think is the typical
E-
recovering
Exactly.
addict, I guess is the right way to say that.
That's it. You don't present as what people may have in their minds as what the look of recovery might look like, and that's really important because it's a doorway to a conversation. So, talk a little bit about being on the other side now, because you've been on the other side for a while now, and I'm sure you have many stories to tell.
Yeah, it's really a very easy thing for me to talk about because it is where I live, right?
Hmm.
I really live in the world of recovery. Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous is the cornerstone of my life. It drives every decision I make, it may sound like it's overwhelming and it becomes who you are, but that's not it. It becomes the cornerstone
Mm.
of how you make decisions. Alcoholics Anonymous in the program of recovery is a design for living. It's a design to help us navigate the world, which is going to continue to be difficult whether we're actively using or not.
Hmm.
When you're not using and you're living in the solution and you're living in recovery and you're living in the basis of that, it means that you make all your decisions based on how does this affect me? How does this affect others? How can I be the best person I can be?
Hmm.
And it seems a little corny, but it's really not. It's it's a way of life
Hmm.
which allows us to make better decisions. Not always the right decision. We're not
Yeah.
I don't always make the right decision, but what I try to do if I make a poor decision is I try to identify it immediately
Hmm.
and rectify it. The One of the steps in the program is when I was wrong, promptly admitted it. So like if I this happens a lot, especially like with the kids or with a coworker, where you get into a maybe a conversation where you may have said something that you wish you hadn't said, or
Yeah.
you were snarky when you shouldn't have been. I have the opportunity now to say, oh, you know what? Hold on.
Hmm.
I could have handled that situation better. Let me just apologize for that right now so we don't let that fester and let's not carry around resentment. So,
Is that
uh,
something you got specifically out of just your learnings out of recovery?
oh
And
God, yes.
okay.
Oh God, yes. Resentment in life is one of the driving forces that drives people back into the depths of addiction.
Hmm.
Is resentment and not owning what your part is in a situation.
Mm.
So it's imperative that you own your stuff. It's imperative, and that's not easy to do
Right.
when you're really digging deep and looking into where do you have fault in a situation. It can be counterintuitive because I've gone through this with some folks that you would think, well, they don't have any part in that. Like when people have trauma in their lives,
Yeah.
a lot of folks with heavy trauma struggle with that. Well, what was my part? Like I
Mm.
didn't instigate that trauma. And
Right.
there's some work involved in digging deep with that. But yes, the work has helped me.
I'm curious as to, do you have a mantra that you wake up every day and adhere to? Because one of the things that, just listening to what you mentioned about being in intent on, or intentional, that's a better word, being intentional about how you say things, and when if you have wronged someone, to automatically rectify the situation. Do you start your day with any kind of particular practice?
I pray. I pray every morning.
Hmm.
I pray every morning, and I pray every night. And my nighttime prayer really is simply for my higher power is God.
Hmm.
But it
Hmm.
could be anything. It doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be.
Hmm.
But I just pray that, quite frankly, that my family, my primarily my children and my wife and the kids are all safe and happy. That's essentially my going to sleep prayer. But my starting the day prayer is always the serenity prayer. Now,
Okay.
the serenity prayer is something that's a big part of recovery. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's the serenity prayer. That's not unique to AA, but
Yeah.
it certainly is a big part of AA. We close every single meeting with the serenity prayer. And think about it. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
So being on the other side for this amount of time, and obviously you've built up the tools, excuse me, you've built up the tools to basically sort of have that fortified stand. But what do you do when the bad days come? What do you do when you have your practices that fortify you and strengthen you? But we all have bad days. And I think for those who are in recovery, there's a greater risk and a greater threat oftentimes of veering back into a place where you don't want to go again.
Right.
How do you manage those situations? And I think that's also useful for people who are maybe just entering the other side as
Yeah.
well.
Great question. So what I really try to do is be incredibly proactive, right? So I'm incredibly proactive in my recovery, which means that every single day I really think about how am I going to live my life today to not be in a position where I could get thrown. So what does that look like? Well, it looks like this. For one thing, I attend at least 4 meetings a week, right? So I'm very regimented in my meeting schedule. I always attend a meeting on Tuesday night, Thursday night, Saturday morning, and actually there's 2 meetings on Saturday I attend. So that's 4 meetings a week. That's my baseline.
Oh.
In addition to that, it's very often that something else will come up. Now, when I say a meeting, that means an AA meeting in the evening. So Tuesday night and Thursday night is 7 p.m. And Saturday is a 7 a.m. and then an 8 a.m. And those are very different experiences. So there's 4 meetings a week, plus anything that comes up along the way, where it's not unusual for one of my pals to call and say, hey, Mike, can you cover this meeting for me on Wednesday night at, say, the Salvation Army or Rensselaer County Jail or Albany County Jail? As I mentioned, I'm a New Yorker. We do meetings in the correctional facilities, which is an experience, an incredible experience. But we go into the jails, and we meet with inmates, and we hold AA meetings. So it's not.
Are they in recovery too? The ones that you're.
We like to help give them some start to it. Some of them are. Some of them are incarcerated because of drugs and alcohol. Most of them are incarcerated because of drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
So we introduce them to the program of recovery, and we do that in the jails, and we do that in the psych wards at the hospitals, mental health centers. So there's meetings all day, every day. So I can be asked on a pretty regular basis, hey, can you go grab a meeting here? Meaning go chair the meeting. In other words, kind of go run the meeting.
And what do you have to do for that, Mike? As a chair, is there a formal program? Is it a sharing? Is it a mixture of both?
So what it is, each meeting is a little bit unique, but they all are based around the same premise, which is we read from the book, the section in the what we call the big book, the Alcoholics Anonymous big book. There's a chapter in it, chapter 5 of the big book. It's called How It Works. And it's just a couple pages that talks about, kind of what this program is about. Then we read the steps, the 12 steps of recovery. And then we, as the chairperson, share what we call our experience, strength, and hope. So I'll take somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and share my story, hoping that spurs conversation from the
Mm-hmm.
crowd. Now
Does
you
it?
got, yes, it
Yeah.
always does. Now you gotta read the crowd too. If it's a big group,
Yeah.
you want to shorten down your chair because you want to open, we have lots of time.
Yeah.
If it's a really, really small group,
Yeah.
you might go longer because you don't want there to be dead space.
Yeah.
And the meetings are almost exclusively 1 hour long. So we try to be, well, we don't try to be, we are committed to, if the meeting starts at 7, it ends at 8. It doesn't end at 8:10. It
Yeah.
ends at 8. Because I
Why
think it's
why the hard stop?
because I think it's only fair to
Yeah.
people in the room that, because if you're going to go to a lot of meetings,
Yeah.
you don't want to be um, you don't want there to be that ambiguity on there. Especially for somebody who's new in recovery and they're leaving their significant other and say, "Hey, honey, I'm going to a meeting. It runs 7 to 8. I'll be home at 8:30." Now, keep in mind
Right.
that person probably is trying to rebuild the trust bank.
Right.
So if he or she shows up at 9 when they said they'd be home at 8:30, automatically red flags go up. Where were
Mm.
you? What were you doing?
Oh, that
So
that makes
it's
sense.
important, Roberta. It's really important. And the rules are very important to us. Very
I,
important.
I actually didn't even think about it that way. I was thinking, and that's such a good point. You bring up the trust because there's probably a lot of erosion of
Oh,
trust that has
oh,
happened on
for
the
sure.
other side, right? So, when if you say you're going to do something, you better do it when you say you're going to. But
Right.
I also wonder about those who have, as you're sharing your story and as you have this 1 hour, we're keeping it to that time frame. What about those who have extra questions
Yeah,
or
yeah,
say,
yeah. We cover that. So when we come to the hour,
yeah,
so what we'll say is, so for instance, tonight's a Thursday night. I'll be at St. Jude's or St. Pius. Those are the
hmm
two meetings I go to. One of those two, and then if we got to the hour and the chairperson would say something like, "Okay, well, we're at the hour. Does anybody have a burning desire?" And if you have a burning desire, that means you can, you can share that,
hmm
or we're going to end the meeting now. We're going to have the serenity prayer, but please grab somebody after the meeting and we'll continue this dialogue. So
mm,
it's not at all unusual, especially we can see, the old dogs like myself, we can see the newcomer who's wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and they have no idea what's going on and they're
uh-huh,
scared, and we'll always pull them aside and say, "Hey man, are you doing okay? Do
yeah,
you want to go grab a coffee? Why don't you just give me your phone number to start?"
yeah,
Right? And so there's always, always, always opportunity, which leads me to, you asked me how this works in my day. And I
yeah,
started with, I'm very proactive with my meetings. That's only the start of it. The rest of it is being connected to other recovery guys on a very regular basis. For instance, this Saturday, 42 of us are going to West Point to watch a football game. This started 15 years ago. There was
hmm
like 4 guys. It's blossomed into 42 men
wow,
are traveling to West Point in a caravan. There's like 8 vehicles. We tailgate, we cook,
yeah,
we laugh. And most of the crew, there's probably 25 of us that are old seasoned folks. And then there's like, hey, there's a new guy we want to bring this new guy in. I keep talking about guys because this particular meeting is all men,
I
but
did wonder, yeah,
it's not just men. It's just the Saturday morning group I go to is primarily men.
okay,
No, it's all men, but other meetings are not. They're co-ed.
okay,
Um, so what do I do? I go to meetings. I'm very well connected to other people in the meeting. I do service, what we
hmm
call service, which is when I go in and bring a meeting into the jail or bring a meeting into a mental health unit. I'm always available to share my experience, strength, and hope with
Mhm.
somebody who might be struggling. And to be very blunt with you, it's everywhere. People need help in every aspect of our lives. If
Mhm.
you can be open and honest as I am, you find your way to helping people.
Mm.
And then lastly, just to close the loop on this, because I have days when I'm not doing well.
Yeah.
Now not doing well simply means I'm off.
Yeah.
I'm feeling antsy.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
I've overeaten or I've undereaten or I didn't sleep well or I'm in stress with my mother or my
Yeah.
brother. So what do? I immediately reach out to one of my fellow AAs, shoot him a text and say, "Hey, what's going on?" Or, "Hey, I'm not doing well. Hey, any chance we can have coffee?" Hey, it's that simple as just make a connection,
Mhm.
reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, what's going on?" It could be simple. It's as
Yeah.
simple as, "Hey, what's going on?" And then it opens a conversation.
So, Mike, what I am finding really fascinating about what you're saying is that you're like entrenched in a whole network and a whole world that if you're not in it, you don't even know exists. Because from the meetings, the tailgating, just the support system you have, is it par the course for everyone who, when they get once they overcome their addiction and they enter recovery, does everyone get this same kind of network system that you speak of? Is that afforded to everyone, or is
It's
it
afforded
like,
for
okay,
sure.
okay,
It's available. It's
okay,
available. The question is, see, it feels when you're new in the program, it feels overwhelming.
okay,
Like, oh my God, I don't want all these new people. I don't even know these people. I don't know anything about these people, right? And they people push back. So what we try to do is introduce it in really small doses,
hmm,
right? Like I'm going to a football game with 42 guys, but that's really just, almost 17 years of friendships and some of those folks, well, I think one or two of them I actually knew prior to recovery,
yeah,
but it's afforded to everybody, Roberta. It's not, I'm extremely lucky because I embrace it. If you embrace it, you can
hmm,
have if you say, okay, I don't want all of this. I
hmm,
just want to not drink anymore.
yeah,
And that's okay too. Whatever works for you is fine.
mm,
I'm just sharing what works for me.
right.
And what works for me really works.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's there's this wraparound service kind of feel, everything you're describing, so that no matter where you look, you're in a sense protected. And it would seem that especially if you are someone that is new to it, having something like this offers a safeguard. I know, Mike, that you are battle tested, you have gone through the trenches, and you're very confident in sharing your story. But take me back a little bit to when you weren't.
Hmm.
Take me back to when maybe there were the pings or of shame and reluctance because you weren't quite sure what those faces were thinking as you talked to them.
Hmm.
Take me back to that time.
That's a great question. So back in the beginning, I had one person that became my guy. Like he was my guy, and we're still together today. I was in a meeting very, very early on, I don't know, like a week in, and there was a man sitting across the room from me, and we kept looking at each other. And after the meeting, I said, "How do I know you?" And he's like, "I don't know." He goes, "Do we live on the same block?" Turned out we lived on the same cul-de-sac.
Mm,
So we had seen each other in the cul-de-sac. And we started going to meetings together. So, like, we started to go to meetings together. And I had this one guy. and he had one guy. He had me and I had him.
Mm-hmm.
And we just really kind of leaned on each other to say, like when things were really not going well, like
Yeah.
struggling financially, the wives are, really upset with us because
Mm-hmm.
of all the damage that we've done. And we took what was called a coffee commitment, where we made coffee for this huge Saturday morning meeting that we both still go to. And when you make coffee at a meeting, that means you get there like an hour early, half an hour, something like that. So you start to meet some other people, and then you start to build this network. But
Mm-hmm.
initially, I had one person,
Hmm.
my pal Max, was in my life, and it became apparent that I also needed some outside professional help.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a therapist for a very, very long time, and that was really important for me. That was really important because Jim was my therapist. He was a recovery guy, which I actually didn't even know. I
Yeah.
didn't even know he was in recovery, and then it dawned on me like a year into it. Oh my God, this guy's a fellow AA. And I'm like, how did I not know that?
Right.
But the therapy was, because of course that's really intimate. That's one-on-one, just you and the therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and safe, very safe. So that was the beginning, is having that one person and the therapist. That was enormously important to me.
Okay. For my listeners tuning in, my guest today is Mike Fazio. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in about 30 seconds.
Whoa, like what exactly is happening here?
89.7 WTBR-FM, Pittsfield.
Support for WTBR comes from Greylock Federal Credit Union, proud to support high school arts and sports programs. Greylock Federal, opportunity grows here, with locations throughout the Berkshires and online at greylock.org. And from Evco Hypnosis. Want to lose weight, quit smoking, sleep better, or relieve stress and anxiety? Evco Hypnosis is here to help you become happier, healthier, and stronger. Call 413-212-0283 or go to evcohypnosis.com. That's EVCO hypnosis.com.
We all know WTBR is great to listen to on 89.7 FM. But did you know that you can listen to WTBR just about anywhere? We've got a web stream and it's easy to use. Go to WTBR-FM.com on your computer and click play. You can use the TuneIn app on your smartphone and connect it to your car's sound system. Or you can use your smart speaker. Just say, Alexa, play WTBR-FM, and there's your community radio station. WTBR, for the love of radio.
You just bought yourself a ticket to Pretzel Town, buddy.
WTBR.
All right, everyone, we have resumed Backstory. Our guest again is Mike Fazio. He is a certified financial planner, but really for Mike's story, it really that's his day job. And I'm sure that's how he pays the bills. But if you listen to Mike's story, his passion really is about his lived experience. And for him, his lived experience is really life, should I say in recovery? After recovery? What is in recovery? Okay.
We're in recovery.
Do you ever come out?
No, you're in recovery. You're always recovering. We're in recovery. We're in recovery. We're not recovered.
That's an interesting point that you mentioned, Mike. Wouldn't that be, and again, I am speaking to someone outside of the world, of the community. Is there an end goal? Like you say, we have reached it. It's here. This is what you work so hard for. I'm curious about the language, the in versus the achieving that goal.
So I can only speak for myself.
Yeah.
And from my learned experience with other fellows, men and women in recovery, the journey is the goal. The win is living this wonderful life of no longer being, strangled by addiction, right? So I don't care about the end result. The goal is the journey is the juice, so to speak. Like this day-to-day experience I have, with which some days are harder than others, just like they are for you and everyone that's listening. But I have a program. I have a way out. I don't have to self-medicate anymore. I don't have to drink anymore. And that's the win, right? Like that's the win. Not to say, okay, well, I've made it X number of years, so now I've won. That's not how it works. At least for me, that's
Right.
in the folks that I spend my days with.
No, so the journey is winning.
Oh, for sure.
Uh, we live in a culture that really everything is tied. When we think about, let's just take alcohol for instance, when we just look at that, isolate that. There's so much that is tied up into that. It is almost ingrained in every aspect of life in terms of enjoyment. And when we think about, you mentioned, you have kids in their 20s. This is the prime time for them to enjoy themselves, for them to get to know themselves, be in a lot of those spaces. What lessons have you conveyed to them, being that they're at a time in their lives where they're surrounded by all of that, because the culture is saying, if you want to have fun, if you want to have a good time, this is what you do. What have you said to counter that narrative?
So that's another great question. And, I'm very open with, as you can tell, with everybody, including my children. So they know my story. So they know that addiction runs in their family. Chances are it runs in most people's family. That doesn't mean that they can't drink, right? Like I know my children both enjoy, my son enjoys a beer probably more often than I know. And I know my daughter, not so much a beer, but, she'll have like a margarita on her birthday or, and that's fine. Like, I think that's wonderful, because I think that people that drink in a normal, healthy way should be able to drink in a normal, healthy way. I just wasn't blessed that way. I didn't have that ability. When I first drank, I wanted more. I'm an addict. I want more. Normal people have a glass of wine or two, or a beer or two, and they're enjoying it. And that becomes, they don't obsess over it. When you're an addict, whether you're addicted to food or shopping or alcohol or drugs or sex or anything, it becomes an obsession of your mind.
Yeah.
People struggle with food addictions all the time. I struggle with food addiction. So, but like my kids both seem to be pretty normal. Now I have 2 kids of my own. My wife has 3. So there's 5 children in our family. One of the kids is married, so there's a 6th, and then there's grandkids. They all seem to be pretty normal.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're sitting around the house having Sunday dinner, it's not unusual for the kids to have a beer.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's really quite normal. And I think it should be normal.
Yeah.
They just need to be aware of the fact that it could be, you got to pay attention. And they're in a house with somebody that lives that disease. So I'm going to help you if you need it, but I'm certainly not going to impart my will on you because you want to have, a couple of beers in the football game.
Yeah, that sounds like sound, balanced advice.
Yeah.
And so I have another question and you tell me what you think about this one. But, again, when you see something around you all the time and you talk about that imbalance, whether it's with the food and there's something there, and I definitely think there are obviously chemical imbalances based on some of the things that are placed in the food, and it creates that addiction
Mhm.
for wanting more of it. We think of things like sugar, right?
Oh,
And how
sure.
you crave that more and more. When you see it, if you see the thing that you were once addicted to, do you have to tell your brain, no, like, we're not doing that today. That's not my life anymore. Do you have to like speak to yourself and say, we're not going to go there?
That's an interesting question, and my answer to you is going to probably surprise you. I have to do that with food,
Hmm.
not with drugs or alcohol. Well, I'm not surrounded by drugs because that's not,
Yeah.
that's not normal, but alcohol I am, right?
Yeah.
So alcohol's everywhere. I could be in a room. I was in I was at a football game over the weekend at a corporate suite through one of the mutual fund providers that we do business with, and it's open bar, and there's, it's anything you want to drink.
Hmm.
That means nothing to me, nothing, because when it comes to my my addiction of drugs and alcohol, I've really worked really hard at understanding why I abused it the way I did and just how bad it can be if I do it again, right? So it scares me literally to death to think about what would happen if I had one Heineken or one glass of White Black. Like it's just, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I don't even think about it. Food, though, is a different story because I'm probably not going to die if I eat that Oreo, or I'm probably not going to die if I have a piece of cheesecake. The problem is, I don't want one piece of cheesecake. I don't want one Oreo. I want all the Oreos.
See, Mike, I'm listening to this and I'm shocked.
Yeah,
I am
figured
shocked
you would be. Yeah.
because, again, you can't see Mike. I can see Mike. Mike does not look like he would have an addiction to Oreos. You look pretty self-disciplined. So did you have food issues growing up?
Oh God, yes. It was my first addiction. Many addicts start with food.
Oh,
Ice cream, sugar, donuts, candy. They're completely addicted. And I was a food addict at a young age with terrible body image, tremendous fear of being ridiculed and made fun of because I was overweight, which I was. Recovery from drugs and alcohol have helped me to get my arms around my food addiction as well. Now, when I share this in an AA meeting, almost every single time someone will come up to me and go, "Oh my God, thank you for talking about this," because I thought I was the only one. And I'm like, you are not alone here. And the food issue is such a slippery slope because we have to eat to live.
Yeah.
You don't have to drink alcohol to live.
Right.
You can just say, I'm not going to drink alcohol, but you have to eat. You have to eat.
You have to eat. But Mike, in our first episode, so we're unpacking a lot here, but in our first episode, you talked about that life was tough. Life was tough with your mom. And at one point you had the help of WIC. And I'm wondering too, if just like how people from, like, let's say, who have gone through like the Great Depression, where they would hoard food because they always thought they wouldn't have enough. Do you think that your eating habits stemmed from never thinking you would have enough? And then when you overcame the food addiction, you traded it for the other one. It's almost like the connection,
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know where the food addiction came from. I don't know why it's still there. It's just it's really very, very perplexing to me, because I live in this extremely disciplined world
Yeah.
where, I get up at the same time every day, I eat the same thing every day, I exercise the same way every day. But boy, do I struggle with this potential for relapse in food. And it's primarily things like sugar. It's
Wow.
primarily, it would be like it's kind of dessert. It revolves around dessert.
I I am like
It's so
100% shocked because
crazy.
I listen, I would never think that, but again, this goes back to you never know what people are battling with. You never
No.
know the battles that people are facing. We really don't. And we see each other and we come up with these narratives that we think apply.
Hmm.
And it would never cross my mind that of all the things that you are still battling and waging this fierce war against is the sugar addiction.
It really is too. It's primarily sugar, but it's food in general.
In general.
It's food in general. Yeah, it is a battle for me. And maybe it's because I've done such a good job of being so clean and sober from those, substances, which I've just said, okay, well, this is off the table. Like, I'm
Right.
not ever going to do, let's put it this way. I'm not going to do that today, because everything we do in recovery is one day at a time. But I really have to plan out my day when it comes to how I'm going to eat. For instance, if we have a work event at night, I have to be careful to try to eat prior, and maybe it's a lot like what it was like when I first got into recovery for alcohol.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a lot like that, or maybe it's just me living in this world of always trying to get better. I'm always trying to get better. I'm always trying to learn. So
Mhm.
maybe I'm a little bit too hard on myself when it comes to this food issue, and I could let myself live a little bit more, but I kind of choose not to.
No, I mean, and I wouldn't, obviously, yourself. And I always say we're our best advocates when we know our body, we know the things that are the triggers, right? We know that. So if you know that, then you everything that you're doing to protect yourself. You're
Mhm.
planning out your meals, you're making sure that you're very strategic. And so that's a perfect tie-in. So interesting. That is a shocker for me. But and again, if you know Mike and you see him, you think you would never know that. But again, it goes back to all that we're talking about. So fast forward now. I mean, so you're battling this part of your life. You're in recovery. Tell me a little bit, if you could share an experience of someone right now that you are helping to get along, and share as much as what you deem appropriate for this conversation. But
Sure.
tell me how you are helping someone right now get to where they need to be.
Great question. And so my most recent situation was a young man who was brought to me from a friend at the gym. I basically spend my life in three different places. I'm either at work, I'm at the gym, or I'm in an AA related environment. So I've got a little bit of cachet at the gym because I'm kind of an older guy that can still hang with the younger guys, and some of the other older guys that are real gurus, trainers, coaches. We're all good friends. So everybody knows my story. And one of the younger men came to me and said that they knew I was in recovery and their friend was struggling in a really bad way with drugs and alcohol. And could I help him? And I said, I would love to. I was introduced to this young man who's 24 years old. He was just getting out of rehab. He was really struggling in a major way, cross addicted, alcoholism, drug abuse. And he's also 24, which is really hard. It's really hard for young people to find recovery. More often than not, they struggle when they're super young.
Yeah.
It's unusual to get clean and sober that young. So I knew the deck was stacked against us, and I just said, I want to help you. I'll do everything I can to do that. I'd say we should just start out with, are you interested in going to a meeting? And he was, and he started to come to meetings, and I introduced him to the other folks, in a small way, not like, didn't overwhelm him with, okay, now you gotta, you gotta do A, B, C, D, because eventually you gotta get into the reading material, you gotta go through the steps of recovery, you gotta get a sponsor. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't even cover, but that's all part of it. But with this young man, I brought him around, introduced him. Weird coincidence. I actually know his parents, which was a strange coincidence. And I tried to keep him connected, but he didn't stick. So he kind of pulled away. He was sober about 3 months, thought he had it figured out. Then he stopped taking my calls, stopped taking my texts. So once he doesn't respond, I'm not going to be the heavy and make him feel super uncomfortable. I just said, hey, if you need me, I'm here. He vanished. And then 6 months later, I got a text message. It was just 2 weeks ago. And he said, hey, Mike, it's so-and-so. I'm in rehab. I relapsed. I got away from the rooms. I'm really embarrassed. And it's taken me a long time to reach out to you. And my response was, oh, my God, thank God you reached out. I'm so happy. I'm so happy you reached out. When can I see you? And he was like, I can't believe you're not judging me. And I said, judging you for what? Being human? Making a mistake?
Right.
Why would I have the right to judge you? And he was flabbergasted by my compassion. Because keep in mind, I'm his father's age, right?
Yeah.
And I'm this old sage who's got this all figured out.
Right.
So he thinks,
Right.
And he was just flabbergasted by how open I was. So anyway, he got out of rehab, and he was home on a Sunday, and I knew he was coming home, and I said, hey, you really should consider this meeting on Sunday night. So we went to a meeting on Sunday night. We went to a meeting together on Monday afternoon. Actually worked from home that day, and I took him to a meeting, and then he came Tuesday night with us to our regular meeting. And he actually texted me last night because his parents live in Florida. And he's like, I'm going down to Florida. I think I'm going to go into an extended rehab facility.
Yeah.
Like a halfway house, we call it. He goes, I gotta chair a meeting. He's like, I don't know what to say. What am I supposed to say? I said, tell him what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. He's like, oh, yes. So what am I doing? I'm just trying to be supportive and show them experience, strength, and hope, but not be overwhelming.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing with this young 24-year-old man right now. That's all I'm doing. I mean, there's others too, but that's a really good case because it's unique because he's too young.
Yeah.
And he didn't make it. He relapsed. He went back to rehab, which I knew he was going to. I knew the writing was on the wall. The biggest thing, Roberta, is ego deflation. You have to deflate your ego. And when we all come in, we're full of ourselves and we think we've got it all figured out. I don't need all this. I can do. Okay. Let's see how it works out for you. I'll be here when you need me. But that's what I'm doing.
And you were. And I think the fact that he took so long to reach out to you.
Yeah.
Because he thought all the things that you said, the judging, the all of that. And you disrupt that. And I'm sure if I were, or anyone were to look at your phone, we would see more instances of many individuals that you probably have on a text loop and a
Oh,
chain where you reach out and you keep those connections going. And so in many ways, Mike, you continue to pay it forward with this next generation of those you're helping. And I guess if the system and if the process works as it should, they too will become their own version of Mike's, right? And it keeps going. And the network continues to thrive because of the ones that come before, equipping the next ones to be able to do the work of support and compassion.
yeah, I think that's spot on. And
Mm.
and I'd say the only thing I would add to that is I think that we have a responsibility, especially for those like me who just happen to be comfortable enough in their own skin to share their own story.
Mhm.
Right. It's easy for me. So I think that if it's easy for you, for me, you really are compelled to share your story because we need to destigmatize what's going on out there. This is not something to be embarrassed about. Like, I wish I weren't a recovering addict, but I am. And it's okay. And I'm going to be okay. But if I can help somebody else understand that it's going to be okay,
Yeah.
and then I think it's on them to then try to destigmatize it going forward to help the next, because we are so surrounded by this. It is everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's just everywhere. And people are struggling and they're dying and they're losing, their families are being ripped apart because they're caught in the throes of addiction. And there is a solution. And it's on people like me and my friends and to help that newcomer in the room. The meeting I go to on Saturday morning is a newcomers group. That's what it's called. It's a newcomers group. You know how many people are in the room? There's like 80 people in the room, and only 20 of them maybe are new. The rest of it is old guys like me who are helping the newcomer. So anyway.
Wow. So Mike, if as we're winding down our time, but if you had any last words, if there are things that, you said a lot, and I hope from this conversation that people can really glean some takeaways that can help, and especially if you are struggling, to know that there is help out there. If you had to just share a message, really briefly, because we're winding down, but what would that message be to those who are listening?
A couple of things I heard when I first came around, which is, one, you'll never have to be alone again. Two, you never have to drink again. Right? You don't have to drink today. You don't have to. There is a solution. There is a way out. You just need to take that first step. And the first step might be simply reaching out to somebody like me. And it can be literally me, right? It can literally be me. I work at Greylock in the main office on West Street. I run the investment division here. It can literally be me, right? Again, it's Mike Fazio. I work at Greylock. Reach out to somebody and just say, I'm struggling. I think I need to do something about my drinking problem. That's the first step. And then we'll take the rest. We'll help you with the rest.
Mike, thank you for having a big heart. I just want to say that. Thank you for having a big heart, and thank you for being compassionate. We need more big-hearted, compassionate people in the world, and thank you for being one of them. I want to thank you for sharing, again, part 2 of your story, being a guest on the show, and being willing to be transparent as you have lived your life in that way. Thank you for sharing a piece of that on this show. And it has been a real pleasure and privilege. To my guest, you've been listening to Backstory. Let's hear it on WTBR-FM Pittsfield with Roberta McCulloch-Dews. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.